Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj. I am Associate Professor in the Department of Computer Science at Jesus and Mary College, University of Delhi. So friends, in this series of lecture, we are trying to look at the different tools and techniques, which we can use for front-end web designing. And we are talking about, the various attributes and various tags which are offered by HTML to design good pages, high quality web pages which are attractive and which are equally informative. So in the last lecture we had talked in detail about how tables can be organized, how data can be organized in the form of tables, that is in the form of rows and columns. Now there is another very important feature, as I told you in the previous lecture also, that tables were also used to organize content on a page earlier, but as we move towards the newer versions of HTML, they offer a functionality or a feature called the frames. Now what is frame? Basically frames are used to divide the entire browser window into multiple sections, and each section can hold a separate HTML file or a separate HTML document. So at the same time the user can see multiple files together, right? So this is like in a table we have rows and columns. Similarly in frames also we will be dividing the screen in form of rows and columns only. We can create rows, we can create columns, or we can create both at the same time also. So this entire collection of frames which we are creating in the browser window is known as a frame set. So actually when you are creating the frames, there are two tags. It's actually a combination of two tags that you use. So first you define the frame set, and in the frame set you declare what is the structure of the frame set, whether you want it row wise or whether you want column wise, and within that you define the frames, and for each frame you define the source file that you need to load onto the frame. Now frames, because there is a lot of advantage of using frames, that is why they are becoming very, very popular, because it allows a lot of flexibility to the user, right? You can place information in different web pages and therefore there will be no redundancy here, right? Because they will make your site more interactive, they will make your site more compact and more informative that way. Okay, and it will also make it very easier to manage, because instead of updating multiple files, you only need to update one single file, because whatever change is happening in one file, you will only update that file, not all the other portions of the file. But there is one issue with this, that the people who may be using older browser, whose browser is not updated, they may not see the content properly. So for this reason, there are different suggestions which are given. There is a no frames tag also which is there, in which you put the information for those people whose browser does not support frames. And some designers, they also advocate that we create both the versions of a website, right? So that the viewers will have an option of choosing whether they want the framed version of the website or they want the non-framed version of the website. But actually, if you look at designer's point of view, it is always good to have a framed version of the website, and within that you define a no frames section, so that the content what you are trying to show, that can be shown using the no frames section also. Then besides this, there are other drawbacks also, because the browser has to load multiple files before the user can actually view the contents of the site. So therefore this sometimes it causes delay if the bandwidth is not good enough, and therefore the customers or the viewers they may have to wait for the website to load. And also because we know that people are viewing the website on multiple devices, even very small handheld mobile devices also. So in that case the screen is not big enough, so that it can be divided into sections. So, for smaller screens sometimes frames may become a little bit of challenging, right. And also because we know that people are using different screen resolutions, people are using different computers also. So, that also causes the frames to appear differently on different computers. So, if the resolution of a particular user's screen is not appropriate, then that user may not be able to see the frame correctly. Okay. And when you are on one particular frame, then the back button on the browser, it also does not work, because you are in a section, or you are on a page which is actually holding 4 or 5 files together. You are creating a container in which the user can actually see 4, 5, as many number of files simultaneously, right. So, therefore, the back button of the browser may not work properly here, and there are some browsers, as I just said, that they do not support the frame technology. So, that is also one big challenge which we see. But even in spite of these challenges, the designers, they are working their way around, and they are creating pages, they are creating websites completely on frame based layouts, and the websites are working quite well. So, this is an example of a frame layout, right. This is only a sketch which is shown. So, here you can see that the entire page has been divided into 3 frames, right. So, the first frame is having the title. The right hand side frame is actually having the content, and the left hand side frame is having the links for that matter, right. So, here what you can see is that these are 3 different files, 3 different HTML documents which are loaded into these frames. So, actually you are seeing 4 files at the same time. One is the frames file, which is containing the entire structure, and within that you have these 3 frames which you have made. Each frame is having a separate file. So, this allows you to view 3 HTML documents simultaneously at the same time, right. Now, if you want to create a frame set, so as we just saw that a frame set will describe how the frames will be organized. Okay. So, we can have frames which are organized, or frame sets which are organized in the form of rows, in the forms of columns, and nowadays in HTML5 we even have frame sets which can be organized in both ways, like rows as well as column, right. So, we have to choose the layout, and then using the frame set tag we also can specify the size of the each frame that we are going to create. So, if you are defining frame set row wise, then you will write the number of rows. If you are defining column wise, then you will create the column. So, you can see here we are using these 3 tags, mainly these are the main tags that we will be using. The first tag is the frame set tag. Within the frame set tag we will have the frame as well as the no frame. So, no frame, I just explained the use of the no frame tag, that whatever content you will put in the no frame tag, it will be shown to the browser, it will be shown to the user only if the browser does not support the frames. So, this is this is like a contingency plan that we are creating. But if the browser of the user is supporting frame set tag and frames, then the no frames will be ignored, it will not be shown to the user, right. So, we will use the frame set tag to give the definition of frames, okay, and we will also give the location and size of the frame that we are going to use. So, if you look here in this window, we have created 3 files, we have created 3 row wise files, okay, and in 3 rows we have loaded 3 different documents, a.html, b.html and c.html. You can also see that the size of each frame is different. So, we can control the size of the frame also, and the location or the arrangement of the frames also. So, we can have frames which are laid out in columns, frames which are laid out in rows. So, how do we define the frame? Now, we come to the real syntax of creating a row or a column frame layout. So, if you want to define row wise, so you will write frame set rows is equal to, and then you will write the size of the rows. Say for example, in this case, if you want these 3 rows, and approximately if we look at this, we can see that the first row is about 20% of the screen area, the second row is about 50% of the screen area, and the third row is about 30% of the screen area. So, we will write frame set rows is equal to 20%, 50%, 30%. Likewise, if you want to create columnar frames, so you will similarly you will write frame set cols is equal to, and you will write the size of each column, right. Now, this column size or row size or frame size, what is to be said, this can be defined in the form of percentage. Most popularly it is defined in the form of percentage, and it can also be defined in the form of pixels, which becomes a little cumbersome. Or you know, if all the 3 rows are going to be the same, then you can use the asterisk also. So, you can write frame set rows is equal to star comma star comma star. So, if you are writing this, then it will automatically divide the entire screen into 3 equal rows or 3 equal columns. You can also write something like this, like you can write frame set rows is equal to 20%, 30%, star. So, in that case what will happen, the first row will be 20, the second row will be 30, and the remaining area whatever is left will go to the third row. So, you can use the percentages or you can use the asterisk. Okay. Besides this also, you know, the first on the main attribute of course is the rows and the cols attribute in the frame set, but we will use other attribute also, like the border, we can use the border color, we will use the class attribute, the ID attribute, style attribute, title attribute, the frame border and frame spacing attribute. So, as I just said, so we can define by pixel, you can define by the variable rows, you can define the rows with percentage, or you can define with variable rows like 20, 10 and star. Okay. Now, after you have created the frame set, so when you are creating the frame set, what you are doing, you are only creating a blank structure or you are creating a blank framework in which the real files have to be loaded. So, the frames are now created, and now we will use the frame tag to fill in or to load the HTML document into each frame. So, we will write frame src is equal to URL. Now, we all know that URL here means the location of the page, location of the HTML file and the name of the HTML file that you want to load in this particular frame, right. So, frame tag actually will be coming between the frame set tag. So, you can see here we have created a frame set and we have created a frame set of 2 equal rows. So, we are writing frame set rows is equal to star comma star. So, this means we want only 2 rows and both the rows are equal in size, and within this we are writing frame source is equal to a.html, frame source is equal to b.html. So, this is 2 frames that we have created, and in the first frame we are loading the file a.html, in the second frame we are loading the file b.html. Now, there is also one thing which we need to understand about referencing. So, the same rule that we have been following so far will be used, that if you want to specify a file which is in another directory, you will write the complete path, that is the absolute reference of the path. If the file resides in the same directory, then you will write the name of the file, that is also going to be enough. Also, one very important point to note here is that when you are using the frames tag, the frame set and the frame tag, you will not use the body tag. So, this file will not have, this page will not have a body of its own, because this is only being used to create a container in which other files are going to be loaded. So, with frame set we will never have a body tag in the file. Also we will not specify anything in the head also. So, you can give the title to the page, but you will not write any content on the page itself. It is only going to be used for designing the blank layout and loading the frames. Then we can also have, we have seen that you can use frame set rows, you can use frame set calls, and there are situations where you can use, you want to create a structure which has got both rows and columns. Like for example, this structure what you are seeing, this has got 2 rows and the second row has got 2 columns. So, this kind of a structure can also be created. This can be created using nesting of frames. So, just like we had talked about nesting of tables, where one table becomes a part of another table, or it is contained in another table rather. So, here also we are creating the frame set in which one frame set is a part of another frame set. So, if we look at the coding here, how we are writing the tag for this. So, we define one frame set which has got 2 rows. So, we write rows is equal to star comma star, and the first row of course is having the file. So, we write frame source is equal to HTML, but instead of defining the second frame, we are using the frame set tag again, and we are putting frame set calls is equal to star comma star. So, now your second row is actually divided into 2 columns, and each column is now going to have 2 different files. So, what you can see here is that you are using a frame set within another frame set. So, this structure is known as nesting of frame set. So, you can see there are 2 rows and the lower row or the bottom row is having 2 columns. So, this can be easily created by doing the nesting of the frame set, right. Now, besides this also the frames attribute or the frames tag has got several attributes. The first and foremost attribute is the source attribute, which is the mandatory attribute, because you are going to specify the path of the file which is going to be there in this frame. Then you can also use an ID attribute. Now, ID attribute is actually used for naming the frame for later reference, right. We also have an attribute called name, frame name, that is also used when you will create the linking between the frames. So, ID can be used and name also has to be used, but the use of both ID and name is different. Then we also see that in some frames we can see that scroll bars appear, in certain frames we see scroll bars do not appear. So, how do we control this appearance of scroll bars within the frame? Then also we need to see that how the margins are created. Margin means that the distance or the space which is there between the document and the border, right. And also we need to we can control whether the user can change the size of the frame, that is the user can resize the frames or the frames are going to be fixed size. So, all these activities, all these attributes of the frame can be controlled. So, the first and foremost attribute that we define of course is the SRC attribute, and then you give the name to a frame, right. If you give a name to a frame, that is also good enough, then you need not give the ID, right. So, you write frame SRC and you write the name of the frame. If you want that the scroll bars should not appear in the frame, then you will use the attribute scrolling. So, with the frame tag you will write frame SRC and you can write scrolling, and you can write yes if you want the appearance of the scroll bars all the time. You can write scrolling is equal to no if you do not want the user to be able to scroll down, and you can also write scrolling is equal to auto. Auto means that whenever required, that is when your file is going on 2 windows, then the scroll bars will appear, otherwise they will not appear. Okay. So, the default in this case is auto. right, but you can still control. If you will say no, then in that case the scroll bars will not appear. Then we can also consider, and we can also control the appearance and the look of the margins of the frame. That is, margin we just discussed is the amount of space between the content and the border, right. So the browser will set the margins between the border, generally the browser does it, and it is only done when the content is too large, right. So margin actually should be big enough for the source text and images from running into the frame's border. There has to be a margin when you are working with frames, because they take some space, right. You want to save that space, but they also create a cleaner and a neater look, because the contents of two adjacent frames should also not run into each other, they should look separate. So therefore it is always important that we specify the margin for a frame. So how you can specify the margin? For that you use two attributes, margin height and margin width. So margin height means that what is the amount of space above and below the content. Margin width means what is the amount of space which is left to the left and right of the page. So you can control the margins on all four sides, the top, bottom, left and right of the page, using margin height and margin width attribute. The value which you will specify, of course, will be in the form of pixel. So you will write margin height is equal to 5, margin width is equal to 5. So there will be a margin of 5 pixel around the content of the page, right. So if you only specify one, then the browser will use for both the browser will use the same value. Okay. So actually, how do you know that what margin will be correct and what will look best on the user screen? This is more or less with experience you get to learn this. So you give the margin values and then you see how the effect is coming. So in this example you can see we have described a frame set. Okay, so this is a 4 frame grid that we have created, which has got 2 rows and 2 columns, and the first frame we have given no margins, but in the second frame we have given a margin height and a margin width of 50 pixel. Okay, and in the next frame we have given a no resize. No resize means that the user cannot change the size of the frame, the user cannot increase or decrease the size of the frame. So for this you simply have to write the word no resize within the frame tag and the user will not be allowed to specify. So you can see here it is seen that you have the 3 frames, okay, and in between the second and the third frame there is a margin which has been left, which has been shown. So of course we already have seen that how you can control the resizing of the frame, that is you will write no resize. Okay, so you will write simply, you will write the word no resize, or you can write no resize is equal to no resize. So the no resize attribute will be included and it will prevent the user from modifying the size of the frame. Okay, then there are frames which has got links also, right. You can have an HTML file. The first example that we saw, or for that matter the very popular site like the Wikipedia site, it is also in that also the layout is a framed layout in which one of the files has got links, right, and when you click the link, the linked file will open inside a particular location, right. So you can display the links in different ways. So the linked file can come in a different frame, it can come in a new window, or it can come in an entire window. So we will be discussing more about how frames and links work and how we can control the opening and the location of the linked documents when we are working particularly with the frames. So we will be continuing in the next lecture. Till then please keep watching CEC. Thank you.